This car is a complete death trap.
Alright, well, I need to take a break from banging on chunks of metal, so I cleared off this abandoned relic here, and we're gonna do some tinkering on it. We're gonna just start by evaluating the situation here. I haven't even looked under here in a while. Begin the process by removing the steering box assembly here, and I'll show you why. Here's the pitman arm assembly here. You can see, in addition to the fore and aft movement, there's also a lot of up and down and side to side and in and out and all around. And basically that's telling me that this is completely sacked out. I'm going to start by removing the steering wheel, hopefully. Oh. That's interesting. It's got these little tendrils on it. I don't actually have a proper puller for this. This doesn't use a conventional puller. And so I'm hoping that it's just going to come off here. Probably won't though. You can see it has these holes here for those tendrils, and in the past when I didn't care, I would just drill and tap these, and then you can use a conventional puller. But I kind of don't really want to wreck this steering wheel. I don't know if drilling and tapping these is going to affect something important or what have you. I mean, I guess it shouldn't, but I think we're going to try everything else to get this off before we resort to drilling and tapping this, just in case we wreck something that we don't want to be wrecking. Beauty. Surprisingly, the bushing at the top of this, you can't really see it because the camera's not going to focus, but it doesn't seem to be completely sacked out. So maybe somebody did replace at least that at some point. I did buy a new bushing for the top, but it feels pretty tight. Alright, well, we haven't been filming very much because, there's not much room to film. This car was actually built prior to YouTube, so they didn't build in tolerances to allow for filming and such as you were working on your automobile. People always say these 1930s cars are super easy to work on and whatever. Maybe that's the case if you're like under 5 feet tall and you have little teensy little hands, but for the rest of us, there's not a lot of room to work in here. And I suppose they're mechanically simple, but you know, trying to get into all the various crevices, and you know, I'm trying to squeeze my body through this little opening here to get into here to do all the things that need to be done, and yeah, there's just not a lot of room. We got all the bolts and the pitman arm off of the steering box, so in theory it should be ready to remove. Little story, I actually have already removed one of these assemblies from my other 35, and the plan was to rebuild the entire thing and have it just ready to drop in, but when I went to pull it all apart, it turns out it's actually completely ruined, worse than this. There are some usable bits on it, but anyways, long story, but the way I got it out of the other car is I just cut a giant hole in the floor and pulled it all the way out through this way. And I kind of don't really want to do that on this particular car because, well, I mean, I don't want a giant hole in the floor of this car. So we're going to try to, you know, not do that. Well, you know, I don't really want to jinx myself, but it's looking like it might actually work this way. Of course, we're not out all the way yet, but I think this is probably the point where it just gets jammed up, and then we find out there's a reason why it has to go out through this way. Yeah, that seems very probable. All right, well, there's our prized possession there. I've been dreading this job basically since I bought the car like 2 years ago, but that came out easy. I thought I was gonna have to tear the whole entire car apart, but got lucky there. Unfortunately, I think that's where the luck's gonna end once we pull it apart and see just how ruined it is inside. So you can see this bolt here is on a concentric, or whatever you want to call it, and when you loosen the bolts and spin this, you can adjust, you know, how the gears mesh together. So that's one of your adjustments right there. That is some nasty looking nastiness. It's not even identifiable as like anything right now. Terrible. Well, I just made the first of many mistakes here. This is actually another one of your adjustments. This little collar on here, you loosen off this, and then you can spin this, and that adjusts the preload on the bearings in here. And to get this out, I need to loosen this off, and to loosen it off, it has to be attached to this clamp on the actual thingamajig itself. So now I have to put this back on to loosen this off. I mean, I probably could get in there with some channel locks or something, but I don't really want to wreck this, or I'd prefer not to anyways. All right, we're going to take a little break here, get this all cleaned up, and then come back when we can actually see what the heck we're working with. All right, well, I think we found the culprit, or one of the main issues here. This unit here has seen some fun times. Anyways, it's not exactly a precision machine job. Obviously, this thing was driven until it was wore right down, and then they tried brazing it, and you know, got it close, probably better than it was, but not great by any means. I mean, I can't really condemn this because I'd probably do the same thing if I couldn't find one of these, and who knows, maybe it kind of worked for a while, but obviously, you know, there's a ton of play in this, and this thing's pretty chowdered up, I would say. You know, somebody's like kind of been through here. Like, it looks like they replaced this outer bushing here, but I don't think it's the right one because there's, well, who knows what it's from. But you can see this inner bushing here. It almost looks like an original, and like it's in poor condition. It's pretty hogged out. I don't know if it's going to show up on the video camera here, but well, maybe you can hear it anyways. There's a lot of slop in this, so that ain't a bit more than the factory tolerance would allow, I would think. The good news is that we have this slightly better unit that came out of the parts car. It's not great, but it is 1,000 times better than what we took out. I think there is a little wear in it, but it's substantially better than what we took out. I suspect, actually, just looking at it now, that this was rebuilt at some point, and the car came out of, I think, only has like 40-some thousand miles on it, which is like less than half of what the other car has, the car that we're actually fixing. So we're just going to use this, and I put a new seal in the end, and we're just going to toss it back together and see what happens. I think I am going to buy a new one of these, or rather a used one or new old stock one, while they're still available. I see the filling station has these, and I was being cheap, and I was like, well, I don't really want to buy one if I don't need one. But I was thinking, well, if I ever do need one, or if this doesn't work, then they go out of stock or become unavailable, because they're not reproduced, they're new old stock from like probably 70-80 years ago. So I should probably get one of these, and then I should get new bushings for this as well. I just left the bushings because, like I said, I think this was rebuilt at some point. There's like not really that much wear on it, so they seem like they were done at some point. But, you know, just to have, I'd like to, you know, probably quit being cheap, and just, like that Shed by the Tracks character ranted about a while back, you know, if you see the parts, you better buy them now, because in a couple months they might no longer be available, and once they're no longer available, that's it. It's game over. You're never getting them. Apparently the seal for these is actually the same up to 72, so good old GM there. But I ordered a couple of these because I got to do the same thing in my 36 as well. There is some wear on this worm gear. I don't know how much, because I've never, you know, seen a good one. So I don't really know much about this, but I can't buy this, new old stock or otherwise. So I'm just going to toss it back in. It seems like the bearing surfaces are fine on it, and it's better than this one, I can tell you that. This one came out of the parts car when I was originally planning to just rebuild that steering box and toss it back in and save this whole process. But now that I look at it, or when I looked at it, I discovered, well, you can see the bearing surface there, not exactly pristine, and I don't know what happened to this thing, but well, I guess the first issue is that we're missing quite a bit of threads at the top, and then as we progress down here, like I don't know. This is the worst rust on the entire car, so if anybody knows like how in the world this could have happened, I really don't understand. Like this car still had floors in it and everything, but for whatever reason, this was just completely decomposed. And so, while anything can be fixed, like, why would you even bother with something like that when we have this one, which is not chowdered up? So we'll just use this one. This one came out of the car that we're fixing, so I don't know. Again, we're gonna put it together with the best junk we got laying around. I actually suspect they were at least trying to fix this steering box, which I guess is a good sign, because it means, you know, a lot of these kind of do-it-yourself restorations, they don't really go this far into it. They just basically slap a coat of paint on everything and call it a day. But it seems like they were actually trying to fix it up and do the best they could with what they had. So I can't really condemn that, and I guess, you know, they tried at least. Whereas, you know, instead of just slapping a coat of paint on and calling good, because I think these bearings were most likely replaced. They actually seem to be good. I did buy new bearings, so we're just going to toss new bearings in it. I like how the texture on the steering column tube matches the texture of the paint on the car. You know, anybody can lay down a paint job that's smooth as glass, but a real painter knows how to match the texture of what's already there. That's that's where the art comes in. All joking and poking fun aside, this is actually the perfect car for me because I can drive this thing, leave it in a mall parking lot. I don't have to worry about dings or scratches or anything. I can lay tools on the fenders. I can rub my hands across it. You know, I can't hurt it. It's and honestly, I'd rather see this than a perfect, flawless paint job because my experience 9 times out of 10, if the car is perfectly straight and has perfect paint and everything, chances are it's hiding stuff. This car has absolutely nothing to hide. It's an honest car. You know exactly what it is underneath the paint and everything else. It's just, it is what it is. It's a 90-year-old car, and it's got the scars and scuffs to show it. Well, it's actually quite a bit later, like 2 months later, and I finally put the steering box back together. Seems like it's going to be a lot tighter than it was before, so that's good. I just, out of the car, what I did is I just set the preload on the bearings in here. I replaced these bearings, and I just set that by turning this shaft. I'm pretty sure I already showed that, and it just tightens or loosens it. And then I went out and bought 2 spring scales just to kind of balance out the two. And in the book here, we're going by the book. Is it done? So we have our chapter on the steering gear here, and it shows you right here how you adjust it with the spring scale here. And we are looking for 1.5 to 2.25 pounds of pulling force to pull the wheel. That is the first procedure in our adjustments. And so we have that currently set at like, I think 2.25 or 2, somewhere in there. And I figured I'd set it on the tighter side of that because obviously as this breaks in, the bearings are going to kind of loosen up a little bit. And we'll probably have to go back and readjust this multiple times. But that's just, I guess, part of the old car fun. So yeah, I just hook this on here and then start trying to, if I can do this one-handed. So it's telling me about 2 pounds on here, give or take. Probably not the most accurate device. It's because of where it's made, but we kind of averaged out. This one's for luggage, I think, and we just kind of averaged out between the two, and close enough, close enough. So the only tricky part of this, I didn't really film any of it because it wasn't all that exciting, just the reverse of assembly. But in order to replace this race in here, there's a little, like a lead plug or something goes in here, so you have to pop that out. And then there's not actually enough room to get like a punch to get this bearing race out. So all I did is I just tack welded a washer to the inside of the race, and then I was able to just go in with a regular punch and knock it out. And the welds, they shrink the race enough, like the heat from the welding, it shrinks the race enough where it just pounds out easy. And I think you have to do this, I think it's like Mopar torsion bar suspension. There's a bushing where you have to do the same thing. I remember doing that before in the past. And so that worked out okay. Gets that out easy. And unfortunately, the new races are built in the same place as our spring scale, which is a bit disappointing. But I thought about reusing the original races, but they are actually quite barked up and chowdered up. I don't know if they were replaced when this was rebuilt last. So we'll see how the I guess like there's not a lot of force on them or whatever, so hopefully they hold up okay for us. Well, I've been underneath the car here for a month of Sundays and doing the various steering box adjustments and the sequence and over again. And the problem that we have is right here. You can see this here. This is that adjustment bolt, which adjusts the end play in the pitman arm. And so that's just on, I think we already showed that, it's on kind of a concentric, and you loosen the nut there. This camera's just the worst at focusing. Anyways, we loosen the nut there, and then you turn the inside bolt one way and you turn the other nut the opposite way, and that just moves the housing, and it changes the way the gears mesh together. And so we've been doing that, and as you can see, there's not really a lot of room to get in here, so that's fun. And I won't tell you how long I've been working at this, but it's been a while. The final adjustment is just this screw here. You just loosen off the nut and turn it in. I think every modern steering box has that now. So the next task here is these motor mounts, and I don't know if you can see or not, but somebody has just kind of made their own motor mounts. And what's happened is that obviously they have collapsed, and that is the reason that I actually parked this car, is because they collapsed and it caused the clutch pedal and everything to bind up, and now we have a whole pile of free play in the clutch, and it's causing the release bearing to bind up and make noise when the clutch is pushed in, because it's not actually disengaging properly, because the engine is rocking back and forth. So we definitely need to fix that, and just really want to give credit to whoever cobbled this together, because they actually made their own bolts for this setup here out of looks like just ready rod, and then they brazed a nut on it with a screw head on it, and this is the other side. It actually broke off, not surprisingly. I can certainly appreciate this, because instead of going to the store and buying the correct bolt, just spend however long this took to make your own. And now I actually do need bolts. This is the correct motor mount, and I need bolts for this, and I don't have any because they're fine thread bolts. So what we're going to do now is we're going to go lay underneath the parts car in the spider nest and the wet grass, because it's been raining, and we're going to remove the correct bolts from the bottom of the parts car. I already got the top bolts out, and so yeah, time well spent. So again, my hat's off to the person who did this, because I would probably do the same in that situation. But we have the correct motor mounts now, so we might as well put them in. Well, we're headed back out to the old parts car again, and already spent an hour last night just putting wheels back on this thing. So time well spent, and boy, I just can't wait to lay under here for a while. Well, you're not going to believe this, but I got distracted again. I was laying under here trying to get the motor mount bolts, and I decided to try once again to get this seized engine loose, and it started moving like 1/4 of an inch. So I started working at it, and now what we're going to do is just, I think, remove the rocker arm assembly here, because I'm not sure if any of the valves are stuck, and I don't want to bend any of the push rods. So yeah. Well, we're back in the spider and mouse nest museum with the pry bar, working this thing back and forth a little bit, little by little. Check out the awesomeness that's been spewing out of this thing. It's actually the evapo rust that I put in here last year, and it apparently it worked. So there you go. This is kind of interesting here. They've got these hold downs and springs kind of holding the push rods and lifters in place. This car appears to have been somebody's old high school hot rod or lowrider or whatever back in the day, 50s or 60s. Kind of got some interesting things that have been done to it. It's actually been lowered in the rear. They made their own lowering blocks out of wood, would you believe? You can see it's quite a bit lower. And if we get up closer to it here, you can see these holes in the fender here where somebody had their own homemade bubble skirts, kind of like the bubble skirts on 35, 36 Fords. And yeah, they kind of got this cool swoopy shape to them. You can see the pattern of the holes there. So it's kind of interesting, I guess. Long-term plans for this car are actually to make it into a 3-window coupe similar to a 37 Chevy that Westergaard built back in the day. So that's a long ways off, but that's what's eventually happening with this car.
I've actually had that parts car now for going on 9 years. I bought it before I bought this car, which is what you want to do. You want to buy the parts car before you buy the car that you actually want to fix. But yeah, the plan for that car all along is to build kind of a Westergaard style 3-window coupe. So I'll probably have to find another 35 Chevy coupe, probably a 5-window because they seem to be more common. So I can splice the back on and then do all that work. But that's a long ways off in the future, and we'll probably run a different drivetrain and suspension in that. So for now, it's just a parts car for this car. But that engine has been seized tight, and I've been trying to get it loosened up for the past, ever since I bought the car. And I tried all different kinds of goose greases and different penetrants and miracle things and what have you, trying to get that engine freed up. I usually go out there once a year and try and bar it over, and it was stuck tight. But last year I put used Evapo-Rust in there, and that seemed to have done the trick. I had pretty well given up on it at this point, but there you go. Just shows you persistence pays off. I guess if we ever decide to get it running, I still may have to pull the head, and who knows, that engine most likely ruined anyways, but it feels like a victory. We got it to turn over finally. Yeah, all right.
There you have it, a successful bolt extraction from the underside of that car. And it only took us a whole afternoon because we got horribly distracted again. Good job, Kyle. Well, we get the old motor mounts out, and how much do you want to bet that this is made out of the old tires that were on this car before they started restoring it? I would be willing to put money on that. Waste not, want not. Got the new motor mounts installed, and it doesn't take too much imagination to see why these didn't catch on. Those are pretty dainty looking little guys there, but hopefully they don't completely disintegrate immediately. That would be nice. Just want to take a quick moment here to give a shout out to whoever sent me a whole box of these things, these 3M Scotch-Brite discs. I'm assuming it's the same person who sent me the 3-inch ones before, and these things work mint, so thank you very much. I sure do appreciate this. Very, very generous. I'm putting things back together here, and I started readjusting the clutch, and you're supposed to only have 1 inch of free play, and we've got like 2 inches of free play before it actually does anything. And in order to even get 2 inches of free play, we had to basically max out our adjustment here, and yes, that does look suspiciously like a chain. So after I got done adjusting this last night, I went inside and I started thinking, and I'm like, well, if we still have 2 inches of free play, the adjustment is maxed out, the throw-up bearing was making noise, you know, why not have a look at the throw-up bearing, you genius? So I pulled off the cover here and had a look at the throw-up bearing, and I don't know if you can see that, but it is basically right now metal on metal. Okay, I loosened off the adjustment there so you can see a little better. Here's the throw-up bearing, and yeah, like I said, it's right down to metal there, and it's just rubbing on this metal here. So that means we get to pull the transmission And so whatever. Glad that we at least found the problem. I think you can get the transmissions out of these without pulling the rear end. It's got a torque tube in it, but I actually have to pull, well, I don't have to pull the rear end, but I got to do spring bushings and some other work, axle seals, and hopefully not a differential rebuild. But at this stage, I wouldn't be surprised if that's what's going to happen, just because that's just the way it is. But oh yeah, there's also a very critical component that fits in between the axle and the spring here that we have to install in between there. So I think we'll just pull the whole rear end out and then pull the transmission, and then we can get that release bearing changed, and then we're just going to ignore all this other garbage here and just hope that it's good, and then take it apart later, because that's just the way that we do things, you know, try to save a few bucks and whatever. Long story short, it wasn't the motor mounts that were the problem, or that caused the throw bearing to make noise and the clutch pedal to drop out to the floor. It was just plumb wore out. The release bearing was just plumb wore out. But that's just the way it goes. And I mean, I'm sure someone will disagree. There's always somebody that will disagree, but like, these need to be changed anyways. So we're not really any further behind, you know, for changing these. And we're back out in the junkyard again. And what we're after today is a throwout bearing. I have this Chevy 207 here that came out of a 35 Chevy truck that I parted out, and it appears to still have the throwout bearing in it. So we're gonna hope that that's not completely ruined. First glance, it looks better than what we got, so I guess we'll dive in and remove that and see what we got. Alright, we just went out to the junkyard there and robbed the release bearing off that junk 207. Came out of a truck, and we're going to try to do a release bearing revival here. Okay, well, I cleaned it up here, and you can see it is a little chowdered up here. One of the clips was missing, and it looks like they were driving it like that for a while. So, you know, but this is 100 times better than what's in the car. I had another look at the one in the car, and it has actually worn a groove into the metal. It's so worn, like it's a 1/16 of an inch down below here already. So like, somebody was actually driving this thing for years with a bad release bearing on it. So it's insane how I'm always impressed with like how badly worn something can be on these old cars and still actually function. And like, it wasn't even making that much noise until, you know, I parked the car, you know, right before the end there. So this should be better, I'm thinking. I think what I'll do is just take a little bit of sandpaper and maybe just sand the sharp edge off of here. But I think with both clips in it and some fresh oil and whatever, I think this will be fine, unless somebody can come up with a reason why it won't be. I don't know if carbon goes bad over time. The theory with these is you oil them, and then the oil actually soaks into the carbon, and that's what lubricates it, I guess. So yeah, actually, you can't buy these new. They have a rebuilding service for these where you send in your old one and then they rebuild it or recarbonize it or whatever. Or there's also new old replacement stock available. And when I looked at the pictures of the new old replacement stock, there's actually like a chunk missing out of it as well on the edge. So I guess with that, you don't really know what you're going to get. It might not even be much better than this one by the time you get it. Plus, it's $130 US plus $60 core charge. The one in the car isn't even good as a core because the metal is worn away on it. So I'd have to send this one in, which seems like kind of a waste, you know. And anyways, $190 US plus shipping. So by the time it gets here, I'm in Canada. That's like at least $400 Canadian for one of these, and I think for $400 Canadian, I'll take a chance putting this one in and having to remove the transmission again. And you know, if I have to remove it again and send it out and or whatever, then I will. But I think this will be fine unless somebody in the comments has a better or knows better than I do. But this was only used up until 1937, and then they just changed over to a standard bearing. And I go on. I think, you know, I could be wrong, but I think I bet you this will last me for years and years. There's people selling these on eBay that are worn down past the wear grooves here, and they're asking like $50 for them. So I don't really, yeah, again, I think this will be fine. Surprisingly, like up until the end there, the car is actually driving fine. The clutch is working. Clutch, you know, still has plenty of grab. It wasn't slipping or anything. And other than the noise at the end there, it was shifting fine and whatever. So I suspect that this will be a massive improvement over what's in the car. Again, I could be wrong, but we'll see. So you can see the steering is definitely a little less sloppy. We don't have this arm wobbling around anymore. So I'm going to call that good enough for now. Leave a comment if you've ever worked on one of these monstrosities before. I'm guessing there's probably not going to be a lot of comments, but you never know. This is a bonnet or knee action style suspension, and I'll show you here kind of how it works. You can see the entire suspension is actually moving. What we have here is an actual solid beam welded directly or riveted to the frame. And I think it's welded in this case because somebody's been cobbling, but anyways. And again, you can see how that pivots there. So then this is the spring. It's kind of a hydraulic-y thing going on in there. And these are your radius arms, I think they're called, and that's what pivots up and down as you go over bumps and gives you that independent suspension, that smooth ride. If you ever look up the old 1935 advertisements on YouTube, the guy, I think it's like Jam Handy or whatever, smooth, extra smooth, that's what they say. These came out in 1934. The Motor Trend people say that this came out in 1937, but they are wrong. And this car is obviously a 1935, and it has this suspension. So I don't even know what they're talking about on Motor Trend, but not too surprising there that they got that wrong. Good news is it appears that this contraption here is still usable and serviceable. It's still working. The bad news is that basically everything else attached to it is completely ruined. So I don't know if you can see the backing plate moving here. That is definitely not supposed to be moving. And then we go down here, and yes, that is a crappy grade 5 1/4-inch bolt jammed in there. That's not supposed to be there. And I don't know if we'll be able to get it to move here, but there's, oh yeah, there you go. Can you see that? That is definitely not supposed to be moving. Perfect. So that is quite dangerous. Useless fact of the day, all Canadian built 1935 Chevy Masters came with the knee action front suspension. The US built cars had leaf springs and a straight axle on the Masters. You had to buy the Master Deluxe in order to get the independent suspension. Another thing about the Canadian cars is they all came with 16-inch wheels. American built cars had 17-inch wheels. And the sedans, the four-door sedans, they all had this humpback trunk on here. The American built cars, you had an option. You had the slant back, which I actually prefer the look of, or the humpback. So kind of a bit weird because typically all Canadian built cars are usually more base and just more plain than the American cars. But in 1935, for whatever reason, we got the more complicated suspension, we got the lower car and whatever. And again, we had a lot less paved roads here in 1935. So again, it doesn't make sense why they chose to make the car lower and have the more complicated suspension, but they did. So kind of a fun, useless fact. Does probably explain why there's so few of these cars left in Canada. Once this goes sour for you, good luck getting that serviced. So most of these cars didn't make it past World War II, several years where you couldn't buy a new car and something goes wrong with this. Yeah, good luck getting that fixed. At least with a Ford or other cars, they had a straight axle, you could do whatever, cobble together anything to make it work. But it's a bit out of the range of just the average backyard mechanic. And there's the inner workings of the mechanical brake assembly. I'm actually just documenting this for my own well-being, so I know how it goes back together. But you can see how it works. It just has this lever here, and obviously when you apply the brakes, it spins that way, pushes the brake shoes apart, and the brakes are applied. And you can also see why we need to fix some issues here, because every time the brakes are applied, it is causing the wheel and the entire assembly here to move around, which is undesirable for obvious reasons. You can also see this is what GM came with. They just used cables. Ford used a steel rod and a bit more clever system for applying the brakes. I think Chevrolet was a little bit more primitive back in these days. This is part of the adjustment, and we're gonna have to I did adjust the brakes on this car when I got it, and I've already forgotten how it was done, but there's a whole procedure for doing that. And once they are adjusted, they actually work quite well, but when they are not adjusted, they work absolutely terrible. So there you go. Well, we got everything apart, and here is, I guess our problem here. Now, this is their solution to the wear problem. So what they had here, as you can see, this is all smooth, all been, looks like attacked with a grinding stone. And if you look closely in here, you can still see the remnants of some threads. This is supposed to be threaded. So what they did to take up the slack is, look in there, there's still some threads. And all they did is they made their own bushing. And then to top it all off, they held everything in place with a grade 5 1/4-inch bolt with all the threads pretty well rounded off. And the bolt is also bent, obviously, from taking the strain of having this beat the snot out of it. So this little bolt was pretty well all that was holding the front end on. Now, I guess the nice thing about this design is technically it wouldn't have just fallen off. In theory anyways, there's enough material on here to prevent this thing from sliding off, unless like a wheel bearing failed or the spindle sheared off or something. So I guess it wasn't going to kill us, at least not instantly, but eventually this was just, well, it's just not very good. Like, just not very good at all. So here's the solution. This is a new old replacement stock Moog kit that I got off of eBay. You can see it's been sitting around for a long time. It's got some rust on it, so it needs to be cleaned up. But you can see how this piece is actually supposed to be threaded. It's not supposed to be smooth. And this thing basically just rides on the threads as it goes up and down through its motions. Same as the early Chevy leaf spring bushings, same principle, I suppose. And obviously it does wear out eventually, but that's the way they did it. So unfortunately, I can't really go much further with this. I'm gonna have to go into civilization because this piece here is actually riveted onto the backing plate. So what I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna go into civilization and get some grade 8 bolts with some lock nuts or lock washers or whatever, and we'll just bolt it to the backing plate. Once you knock those rivets out, I don't have any way of re-riveting that, so that'll be okay though, I think. I thought I could almost just use this one because the threads are still intact, but I went to thread this on and it does have a fair amount of play in it still. So we'll just go ahead and replace it now because I don't really want to ever do this job again. As far as the backing plate play goes, this is the old bushing there, and I guess it's not as bad as some of this stuff, but this just presses into here. But when we go over here and we have a look at how this goes on here, I don't know if you can see that, but it does have quite a bit of play to it. It's rocking on there, so it is worn. So that would be what mainly was causing our backing plate movement there. And here's the replacement again, new old stock or whatever off of eBay, and see that is a much tighter fit. No moving back and forth, so it certainly doesn't take very much for this to wear in and cause that backing plate to move, which again, not really desirable because every time you step on the brakes, it's going to be rocking back and forth, and it's hard to adjust the brakes properly when the backing plate is moving around on you all the time as you're driving. So all of this should really improve the drivability of the car, I would hope, and even a little bit of, it might even make it safer. And as you know, longtime viewers, I'm not a real big on safety. It's not really my thing, but you know, it sure makes it nicer when the car isn't a total death trap to drive. That's Just want to say thank you to our buddy and patron of the show, Paul Stanley. He sent me a whole pile of stuff in the mail here. We got a hat and t-shirt from the BC Pioneer Truck Society. We got some notebook for, you know, writing all our secret cryptic messages and what have you. And he sent some Spice Dragon Red, I don't know how to pronounce that, herbal tea. Sounds pretty healthy, and some snacks and some mints and some music for us to listen to. And what else do we got here? We got some welding mittens and a cat and some beef flavored kitty bits. More than 75% meat. That's up from 70% last year. The cats seem to be enjoying it, so thank you very much, Paul. Very kind of you to send this out. And, well, you've made Kyle and the cats happy. All right, well, none of this was very interesting, but we got our arm and what have you all put back together here, all pre-greased and ready to go. And what else? Oh, yeah, we got the new bushing in here. So everything is ready to go back on the car now. And hope for the best, I guess. And now we come to the part that I have been dreading for quite some time. The rear differential situation. Not great. Not as bad as I thought, but not great. Yeah, so it doesn't really show up on camera, but our carrier bearings are cooked. I can take this with my hand and I can wiggle it around, which I'm not a differential expert, but I don't think that's good. And just based on everything else on the car, we're basically into this for a full rebuild. Gear set, I can't buy a new ring and pinion, at least just searching so far. Everything on eBay is for a standard, which is a completely different car. And everything is just new old replacement stock, and most of it looks like it came off the Titanic. So even if we could find a better set, well, it's probably not going to be any better than what we have. So we're stuck with this, but I mean it's not as destroyed as I was expecting. The gear set seems to be okay, but well, I mean, all things considered, but definitely bearings are shot here, yeah. When I was driving this car around 20 to 30 miles per hour, there was kind of not a grinding sound, but like a womp 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 sound. And I would say that having this, rocking around in here was most likely the culprit. So, disappointing, but not disappointing, because I mean, that's a pretty obvious problem. So we at least are not chasing problems, so that's good.
So where do we go from here? Well, next step is I'm gonna go out to the parts car if it ever stops raining, and I'll crawl back under there again. That'll be fun, and we'll pull the cover off the differential in that car, see if the differential's in better shape, which probably there's a 0% chance that it's gonna be any better. It's most likely ruined. That car's been sitting around for so long, but I guess we'll have a look at it, see what's in there. And if it's complete garbage, which it probably is, then unfortunately that's about as far as we can go on this car, at least at the moment. I started pricing out bearings and seals and new U-joint and what have you to rebuild the rear end in this car. By the time everything gets here, we're going to be into it for like $1,000 Canadian. And then me teaching myself how to rebuild a differential, so that'll be an adventure there. And I can't afford that right now. That's a bit too much for me, because I mean we still haven't gone into this car all the way yet. I'm sure there's going to be other problems that we'll uncover that we'll have to spend money on. So yeah, not great, but at the same time, I'm just glad that it's not worse than it is, and I'm not going to be driving it like that. If I would have kept driving it like that, it would have got a lot worse, and we would have had a lot more cartage. Surprisingly, the oil isn't like super silvery or anything like that, and there's no chunks in it. So, I mean, that's good. So, I'm glad we caught it before, it got any worse, but it is going to be a costly repair, which is just the way these things go. Anyways, next week, we're going to be back on the chicken truck again. I know everybody wants to see chicken trucks, so we're going to be back on the chicken truck. And then this Sunday, which I believe is the 26th of May, noon Saskatchewan time. You'll have to Google that to see whatever time it is where you live. But it'll be noon in Saskatchewan. We're going to attempt to do a live stream, the cats and I, And so if anybody has any questions or just wants to stop by and harass me, we're going to be doing that noon, May the 26th on Sunday. And yeah, I've been getting a lot of nice comments and a lot of questions and stuff from you folks, and I tried to reply to them. And lately, YouTube, 3 out of 4 questions I answer, YouTube just deletes my response to them. And so that's a bit frustrating because I get like a couple thousand comments every month, and for me to spend a bunch of time trying to reply to as many as I can and then just have YouTube delete them, and then your questions or nice comments don't get answered, that's definitely a bit frustrating. So anybody who has any questions or wants to stop by and, you know, share their input or whatever, or again just harass me, we'll be doing a live stream on this coming Sunday, and hopefully that works out for everyone. And yeah, thanks so much for watching whatever this was, and like I said, back on the chicken truck next week.